As you heard, we are recording this and we will post it on our YouTube channel probably tomorrow. So you will get, anyone who's registered for the meeting will get sent a link to that. All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Mass Pollinator Network's May meeting. It's a panel discussion on why pollinator pathways are important and how to create one. First, a few reminders, and I will drop the links to these as applicable shortly, but we have a packed agenda on our presentation, so I will do that while it started to not take up more time. So the first one is our next brown bag lunch is Wednesday, June 5th, noon to 1. We hope you join us. It's on Zoom. We also have our pollinator art show that is still up through June. It's at the Irving Public Library, and I encourage you to go if you're anywhere nearby. It's really beautiful. There's a macro photographer and a watercolor artist, and they both have really wonderful takes on pollinators and their plants. And then the last update is our next monthly meeting will be Tuesday, June 25th. And it's Gardening for Nature Using Ecological Principles to Enhance Pollinator Habitat with Brendan Carson of Tufts Pollinator Initiative. So now, and I will just give one reminder that everyone mute if you are not actually talking. Thank you. So for our presentation, please hold your questions, either hold them till the end or you're welcome to put them in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat, but just to keep our presentation flowing, unless it's something where like you can't hear the presenter or something, we will wait till the end, but I'm happy to keep track of those questions. So on to our presentation. Our panelists have worked on pathways in their towns and have lots of experience and knowledge to share. And I'm going to introduce them all now, and then they will each be speaking for a bit. In 2016, Peggy McLeod organized pollinator activists into the Western Mass Pollinator Network. A dozen towns and 600 gardeners joined forces, and the group evolved into the Massachusetts Pollinator Network, which we are. Peggy remains active in our Speakers Bureau to raise funds for MAPN. Brucey Moulton is a member of the Massachusetts Pollinator Network Steering Committee and a co-founder of the Mystic Charles Pollinator Pathways Group. Rick Lent and Sharon Brownfield are co-chairs of Sustainable Stowe. And last but not least, Vivian Orlowski lives in the Berkshires, where she serves as Operation Pollination Program Director for the Upper Housatonic Valley National Heritage Area. Vivian is also a member and former chair of the Great Barrington Agricultural Commission. Now I will turn it over to Peggy.
Let's see if this works. All right, now hit. Hello, everybody. See if I can make this happen. Miracle of technology.
Looks great, Peggy.
Okay. Okay. I'm really happy to be here tonight, and pollinator pathways is something I've been, delighted to hear is spreading everywhere. And I want to do, my introduction is mainly about the basics, not too specific about pollinator pathways. And I think I'm trying to give a good overview to everyone else who is going to get a little more specific to their own town. Okay, something is in my screen and I can't, okay. Anyway, humans have pathways going everywhere around the planet, and many of them have destroyed the habitat of the plants and animals that were there before them. So, we build roads and we repair them and we put mechanical things on them to transport goods. We bike on them. I think we're getting a little smarter about our paths now, as many of the roadsides are beginning to outline where bicycles can go safely. So what are pollinator pathways? The concept is rather new in the 21st century, and I see them as their ecological projects, they're social projects. They are designed to connect the isolated green spaces that we have, and it makes a more hospitable environment for pollinators. And so this movement is growing, and I hope it continues to grow. So what do pollinator pathways accomplish? First of all, most importantly, they repair the fragmented landscapes. If we turn back the clock and went into the several centuries ago, our landscapes were much more connected. We didn't build gigunda subdivisions. We didn't have to have all kinds of cloverleaf highways. It was a lot simpler, and the plants weren't destroyed so much, and the animals and birds and bees and pollinators can get from place to place. So what we're trying to do now is to repair these fragmented landscapes. The second thing is pollinators naturally are foraging for their food. And what happens when we just have a garden in front of somebody's house, and then, 100 yards down the street, another garden in front of somebody's house. The bees might not get everything they need in the first house, so they have to fly a distance to get to the next place where they can forage for the nutrition that they need. So the aim of a pathway is to create a continuous bee buffet, bee and butterfly buffet, so that they don't have to use so much energy when they are hungry. They can just go from plant to plant. And if you look into some of the principles of building pollinator gardens, it's always been recommended to plant species of plants in clumps, instead of one here and 10 feet away, another one, and 10 feet away, another small one. This way, the bee can just go from plant to plant. And I love watching bees. And when you look at a bee foraging in a clump, you'll see them go, or hummingbird the other day, I saw go to every single one of my Japanese iris, and it was just delightful. They didn't have to fly anywhere. They could cover like 25 different flowers at the same time. And by doing these two things, repairing the landscapes and creating a continuous bee buffet, you're building that resiliency that we need for our pollinators that are being threatened from many different sides. So resiliency is what we're going for. Okay, next slide. Uh-oh. One really important thing in building a pathway, and even doing your own garden, is that different species of birds and butterflies are able to travel only what their species allows them to. So monarchs can go, as we know, monarchs go many distances, up to 150 miles, not when they're migrating, but just normally. Bumblebees and honeybees can go from 1 to 2 miles. And then the smaller bees, leafcutter bees, 1,500 feet.
Hey, Peg.
Eastern, yeah.
We still see your first slide.
You're kidding. What? You're still seeing my first slide?
Yes.
I'm going through my slides. So this is what you see.
Yes.
Okay, maybe I'll just leave. And now do you see my second slide?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just do it this way. It won't be as pretty, but okay. So
Okay.
Quick review. Thank you for telling me. I don't know what happened. So here's, us on our many routes and our traveling. Pollinator pathways was mostly just explaining that. And then I had the three things that we are trying to do through pollinator pathways. And here's the slide I was just talking about. So it's really important to know that you need to pay attention to all the species of bees, including the tiny, tiny, tiny ones that can only go about 20 feet. So you don't want to have, if you're trying to cater to a certain kind of bee, for instance, the long-tongued bees are the ones that are, bumblebees are the ones that are more or less threatened right now. So once we figure out what long-tongued bees like, what species of plants they like, we need to put them closer together if that's as far as they can go. So that's just an important principle. The basic building blocks that we want to pay attention, let's say you're in a town somewhere or in a neighborhood is choose some prime locations. So you have to think about, do I want the public to see what we're doing with restoring pollinator locations? So do you want some, pretty obvious central places to choose to build something for pollinators? Next thing is to add as many native trees and native plants. Ornamentals are fine sometimes in your garden, but when you're targeting pollinators, they want natives. They co-evolved with native plants and trees, and so that is going to have the most nutrition for them. You also want to subtract lawn areas, and I know a number of people that were out here in Western Massachusetts. One of the first things they did was tear up, 1/20th of their lawn, then it became 1/5 of their lawn, and they created a larger pollinator gardening area on their lawn. And speaking of lawns, do you really have to mow every week? Every Monday, get out that lawnmower. What we found through studies, I know of a study in Springfield by UMass, is that reduced mowing creates the chance for native flowers to pop up in our yards. Tiny native flowers. It doesn't get that long after 2 weeks. So if you can do anything to subtract your lawn area and or reduce the amount of mowing that you do, that's another building block. Also, most important, avoiding pesticides, period. The pesticides are harmful to not only the bees and the pollinators, but any of their prey, any of the birds that come and eat any of the pollinators that have had pesticides are also going to suffer. And then lastly, to leave the leaves at the end of a season. You don't want to rake every single leaf off the ground. Those leaves are very important for overwintering habitat. And it's important to know that, because you could be disturbing cocoons or overwintering beetles and butterflies and moths. So good to leave the leaves. Okay. The first pollinator pathway, it was created by a scientist in Seattle, Sarah Bergman, and for 10 years, she studied concepts on building pollinator pathways. And she became convinced that while pollinator gardens are great, to join the plantings are far more beneficial to the pollinators in the ways that I've already explained. And also she saw working on a pollinator pathway as a way to produce less sprawl, because you're always thinking of the connections rather than the putting a new shopping center somewhere. You're thinking of, well, if we're joining these connections, what's that building or what's that subdivision going to do to break up those connections? So that's the principle that she came up with. And also another principle is that she wanted people to see nature as something here near us. We're part of nature and not always have to leave a city or leave a neighborhood to go to where nature is. The actual pathway was 2 miles long from the University of Seattle. Might have been the University of Washington. I've forgotten now. 2 miles long down a main street to a large park at the other end. And she helped design many of the pollinator plantings that were on that sidewalk strip over that 2 miles, and it became quite a project. In Northampton, our organization, Western Mass Pollinator Networks, started with gardens. I knew nothing when I started the organization, and so we learned about native plants and which species to choose, and so people were creating gardens in their front or backyards. And then, the concept, I guess I must have heard of the Seattle pathway. And then I was at the city hall one day and I saw their bicycle map. So, we have bicycle paths that go through the city, and this was laid out, and this is a portion of it. And I thought, oh, I see. that could become, or it's a concept we could use to create a pollinator pathway in Northampton. So because we wanted to have a lot of visibility with the pollinator pathway that we were going to create in Northampton, we started with public plantings, and I call these anchor plantings. And then we also got signage to put up to let people know, we're using native plants, and we're doing this for pollinators. And so that it started with the concept of anchor plantings, and I think we have about 8 of them now. Unfortunately, it isn't a very active expansion project right now, but we do try to keep up the anchor plantings. And then from there, people got interested in making their own yards connect to that. So pollinator pathways could emerge from a network of yards. People in a neighborhood could start talking together, which often happens. Oh, what are you doing over? What are those new plants you have? Neighbors are neighborly. And I created this slide to just show, everyone's got their own idea of how they want their flower gardens to appear. So it doesn't have to be anything designed to look the same. It could just be people learning about native plants, talking about maybe you can put some shrubs of this kind in your yard. I want to put flowering shrubs in my yard, and just, have it kind of organically grow from that. Now, the concept of the virtual town park has happened when people talk about how many yards we have, what's the size of lawns in America. It's just millions, and I think it's 40 million acres of, Amy, where are you? You probably know that number. And so when you think of yards, it's actually perfect for wildlife if you connect yard to yard. Most yards have trees. What you want to do is, make sure you have the right trees, make sure you have the trees that are most enjoyed by the pollinators. If you begin to really think about joining your yards and talking to one another about what kinds of plants you have, the native bees won't have to travel that far. And there's examples of people who don't have any flowers. They create a native flower garden, and all those butterflies and all those bees do show up. If you build it, they will come. It does work. Also, a pathway, when you talk about yard to yard, it kind of counteracts the fact that we've taken away the habitat of the pollinators, because you're now sharing that land with them. We don't like doing it with the bunnies. I'm not saying we have to like bunnies to come and chew on everything we plant, but it is, we have taken that habitat away. So this is a counteraction to the loss. And also, if you can get something going in your neighborhood, sometimes native plantings are not as formal looking, you could say. If you decide to only mow your yard every 2 weeks, you kind of have to de-emphasize lawn perfection. I've seen some great signs that's not no mow May, but something like excuse the mess, we're planting for bees, or something that identifies that you actually have a more loose fitting garden. It doesn't have to be, but this might be something you think about when you do something in your neighborhood. Now, I talked about yard to yard. What's happened on Cape Cod, it's become a huge greenway through many of the towns. And this is a map that they created of people that are participating. So it is a movement, and I'm delighted to say that many people that start on their own in their gardens, what we found in Western Mass, and I'm sure in the other towns, is that people start asking questions. Where did you get your plants? What are native plants? And it's a thing you can talk up and become quite successful. You can use Google to map the addresses of people that join and or that are participating. And it's sometimes a visual will be very helpful to continuing the project and to reaching out to other people. One example town, Marblehead. I gave a talk there recently and I grew up there. And they've created a wonderful book called Discovering Marblehead, which is so tightly packed. I mean, house to house, there are tiny little gardens everywhere. And it's really one-way streets. You'd think, oh my God, there's no place to put anything. But they created this wonderful book, Discovering Marblehead, which has about 25 different green spaces all over town. And it's a perfect example of how you can use something you already have to consider, some of their green spaces have a lot of invasives. So one of the things they probably have to do is take care of invasives in some of the green spaces. There's a pond that I recently walked in, which has multiple habitats around that pond, but they're not paying attention to how that habitat is serving a variety of pollinators. So a group could focus on that pond and kind of do an informal survey and figure out what they wanted to add to make it a better pollinator habitat. One opportunity that people might find is to convert underused space. And this is, I forget which town this is, but is it Stowe? Do you recognize it? No, okay. Sometimes when you reuse slides, you forget the details. But a number of people have even taken parking lots and where you're never going to plant anything, and they've created raised garden boxes and actually started to have more birds and more butterflies and bees in that area. All of these projects, I should say, most of these projects are done with volunteers. And I will say people like to be asked to do community projects. It's not something we should be afraid of asking. Or the final thing is you could go through a more formal process. A number of towns in the region have used Evan Abramson of Landscape Interactions to have him design a more formal creation of a pollinator habitat, or yeah, most of the places are just like a larger habitat or large meadow. I'm not aware that he's done pollinator pathways, but that doesn't make any difference. He has, and I think one of the resources we're going to be able to give is a link to some of his work, and also Robert Jagir's lists of native plants that can be used in everywhere in Massachusetts. So this is one of the projects that he did. And I forgot to mention pollinator-pathways.org, which started in Connecticut as probably about 200 towns that have joined Pollinator Pathways and are created them through volunteers. And that is going to be one of the resources. There's links to a number of those towns, and you can learn the different types of projects that they've done. Really fascinating, and a lot of human work went into that, and it will greatly benefit the pollinators. So thank you very much. I now wanted to see what Brucey from Mystic Charles has to say about what they've been doing. Unmute yourself.
That's a particularly good place to start. So I'm talking on behalf of the Mystic Charles Pollinator Pathways group, which I'm not, and I have to find, let's see, it should come up right here. I know which I want to share, but it isn't. Here we go. So I'm talking on behalf of the Mr. Charles Pollinator Pathways group this evening, a group that I co-founded with several other people in the greater Boston metro area in 2020. It's located in the Lower Mystic and Charles River watersheds, which are adjacent to one another. Let's see. Oops. I'm trying to get the, it looks to me there. Maybe you can see that a little bit better. I think some of my information is running off the bottom of the page, unfortunately. So we met by chance at a Sustainable Belmont meeting in 2020 when Jean Devine, a native plant landscaper and educator, was giving a talk about creating meadows for pollinators. That talk drew a number of like-minded people, and we connected during the Q&A. Someone suggested having a competition between several towns to see who could plant the most pollinator gardens. That competition didn't happen, but several of us began meeting, and we figured out what we wanted to do. Let's see. There we go. Oh, that's interesting. All right, I'm going to back up again. Sorry for the. I'll just go back there for a minute. First we had to figure out what we were going to call our group. Then we determined that we wanted an interactive online map showing local pollinator gardens. So we developed a survey, both fun and educational, for people who wanted to get on the map. And we arranged for a sturdy, attractive, and inexpensive sign for gardens that joined our map. Now we're going to start going through here. So we have surveys and maps. Unfortunately, this print is rather large, so some of the links aren't showing, but I'll drop them in the chat afterwards. The survey, here is the start of it, is intended as both educational and fun, and it's the entry point for getting on our maps. We have several different maps. And this is a sign that we chose. We ordered it from the group based in Connecticut that is now spread all over the place. It's very similar to, it's the same sign basically that the Cape Cod group is using. We arranged with the Connecticut originator that it would be okay for us to add our name on top using this clear vinyl that's suitable for outdoor. I can tell you it lasts very well based on how we've done it. And we got it for very little. We're able to sell it for $5 or $6 for a 6-inch sign and about twice that for a 12-inch sign. As we developed our map, we came up with, as you can see, this is a screenshot of what it looks like today. And I'm going to explain what all those different symbols mean in just a moment. So the public green spaces, we have a separate survey to add green spaces to our map, have a green icon. Home native plant gardens have a yellow icon. If they have asterisks, they're photos that you can look at. You don't have to belong to the Pathways group to look at the map and to see the photos. We also have demonstration home gardens, which you can visit. Those addresses are made available online, and they have this pink icon. And finally, we show pathways based on bee travel distances. So here's now we're starting to drill down on the map as you enlarge it through successive clicks. You begin to see more and more detail. And this shows you, so we have Cambridge in here, that's Fresh Pond, up here is Spy Pond on Route 2. Boston is kind of over here. Arlington, Belmont, Watertown, folks in Medford, some folks up in Winchester, some people in Newton. Now we drill down still further and you can see the pathways, and the colors of the lines mean something. Depending on the color and the thickness of the line, you have that tells you the distance that the bee can fly. The distance between these floral resources and how far the bee would have to fly in order to take advantage of them. And so the Mr. Charles Pollinator Pathways has worked on communications and outreach. We have a Facebook group. You can email us at this address. We have a Google group. We have monthly meetings, generally interesting conversations. We do seed cleaning bees and swaps. And we're always looking for new ways to connect with more people in our area to talk about the importance of pollinator pathways. And now I'm going to turn you over to Sharon Brownfield and Rick Lent.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. We're trying to get our camera changed here, our screen.
Go ahead and talk.
All right, we'll start. We'll get the screen set in a minute. So we're in Stowe, a little west of Brucey, sort of out along Route 2, just about near where it meets 495. It's a very small town, about 7,000 population, with a lot of green open space, but relatively few resources for pollinators. We began by building a very visible pollinator garden in the center of town at the white UU church, which all towns in this this part of the state seem to have. And it has a sloping lawn that faces Route 117 and 62, which are the main highways in the session. So we built, it's about 30 by 70 foot pollinator garden there. And we used plants from Native Plant Trust. This is now its second year. And so it's now really coming into flower. It is not close yet to other pollinator gardens. We put the pollinator pathway sign up there, but given its location, it was good because it was visible. It wasn't good because it didn't have, sort of nearby pollinator gardens. But what we did was we took that to begin educating our town and begin building a pollinator pathway map for the whole town, giving away seeds to encourage others to plant their own gardens.
So we basically are at the very, very beginning. Sustainable Stowe got interested in pollinator pathways and individuals took action. What we're now going to be doing is we will be launching a website called Energize Stowe, and you'll see that here. Energize Stowe has a much broader remit, which is to get the whole residents and community members really engaged about doing things to help reduce their use of fossil fuel and climate change, to help support that. But what this website does is a very interactive way of getting people engaged. And we have as one of our actions to have them begin to join the pollinator pathway. So what we have on this website is at first a description of what a pollinator pathway in Stowe could be and how to work it. And then we have steps individuals can take to get engaged in a pollinator pathway. And then we'll have testimonials, which people who have started a pollinator pathway, and we'll have what's called a deep dive, which gives a lot of links that people who are interested in having more information. This month, in June, we will be having a library program that will introduce this website and talk about the different actions that people can take. One of the advantages of having people engage in this website is that we will be able to know who has signed up to do pollinator pathway. You can sign up to having done. Let me go back. You can check it and say that, is this a to-do, something I want to put on my list that I'm going to get involved in, or something I've done. What we will then have is we'll have their information, and we can then start mapping it into the town to get an idea of where people are. When we went to a Spring Fest, which we hold usually annually, townwide event, and we tried to get people to take seeds and start a garden. We put on a map where they're located, but we had no way of following up with them. So this way, through this website, we'll actually be able to follow up and track where they have it, and certainly want to talk about creating an interactive map like was just shared with you. So that's what our strategy, we're really at the very beginning of trying to get people engaged and excited about this. And with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Vivian.
Thank you. I have to unmute first, and then I have to share my screen. I'm going to stay off the screen to focus on my slides. And see, can you see that? Great, thank you.
Beautiful.
So now let me introduce this. It's great to learn so much about pollinator pathways. And for pollinator pathway support, now let's consider national heritage areas in Massachusetts as resources. Next slide. Oops. Slides are, hold on a second, I've lost. There we go. Let's see, this is going to happen every time. There are 62 national heritage areas in the United States. All are in partnership with the National Park Service. And as the map shows, there are 5 national heritage areas, or NHAs, that cover different regions in Massachusetts. National heritage areas can help support pollinator initiatives in their regions in various ways. Examples from the 5 NHAs that I showed on the map include publications, education, partnership grants, workshops, events such as Pollinator Week celebrations, pollinator garden walks and bike tours, community collaborations such as pollinator resolutions with Rotary clubs and districts, and supporting ecological design for college, school, college and school campuses. Let's start in the middle of the state with the last Green Valley National Heritage Corridor. The slide shows their In Touch member magazine focusing on pollinators. The area includes the Sturbridge region of Massachusetts, along with a large neighboring area in Northeast Connecticut. Quote, the last Green Valley is not a traditional park. Instead, citizens, businesses, nonprofit, cultural and environmental organizations, local and state governments, and the National Park Service work together to preserve and celebrate the region's cultural, historical, and natural heritage, end quote. That's one of the reasons why they can help your pollinator pathway efforts. Just this month, next slide. Just this month, for example, the last Green Valley National Heritage Corridor sponsored a workshop on pollinator habitat establishment, and it was hosted on a farm in their region. Another area is the Upper Housatonic Valley National Heritage Area, known as Housatonic Heritage for short, which covers 20 towns in Western Mass in the Berkshire region and 9 in Northwest Connecticut. Housatonic Heritage Operation Pollination Program has included a course for OLLI, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, on honoring our indigenous heritage, people, plants, and pollinators. Gardening with Native Plants, a webinar for OLLI by Massachusetts Pollinator Network Steering Committee Co-Chair Amy Meltzer, and collaborating with Berkshire Community College for ecological campus design project and planning with the Conway School of Sustainable Landscape Design. The Conway School students developed a living laboratory on the learning landscape for Berkshire Community College. And this is an aerial view of their campus. Their report was 30 pages of design and research, and included bee lawns at Berkshire Community College as part of their ecological design planning. And bee lawns hopefully can be seen as part of pollinator pathways. Another initiative in the Berkshires was a pollinator resolution joint signing with the Rotary District, and it took place in a park, and the Rotary District covers right area in Western Massachusetts, not just the Berkshires, and a lot of Northwest Connecticut. The resolution was quite common among all the NHAs, and on the right is the one from Housatonic Heritage with their Rotary District, and on the left is the Essex National Heritage Area with their district. Essex National Heritage Area includes all 3 municipalities in Essex County, Massachusetts, and they have activities such as Pollinator Week, and they also have annual partnership grant program. This is just the first page and 8 pages about the grant, and this is something that a lot of the National Heritage areas offer to their communities. Another National Heritage area is called the Blackstone River National Heritage Corridor, and it's along the Blackstone River. And they did a pollinator resolution with their Rotary District, and they were creative with a pollinator bike tour to visit pollinator gardens, as well as other events. One of their interesting combinations within a National Heritage area, which focuses not just on natural resources, but on history, is to have pollinator plantings on historical sites, many for buildings. Another National Heritage area is Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. 45 municipalities in North, Central, and East Massachusetts, and a little bit going up into New Hampshire. This past year, they were proud to help publicize the Tufts Pollinator Initiative and walks and talks on Operation Pollination. And they can help publicize your events, your local National Heritage area. Another example is their website features a meadow at the Community Arts Center called Art Space in Maynard, which neighbors Stowe. So maybe in the future, there could be some pathway connections there. Many of the National Heritage areas are now involved with Operation Pollination, which is founded and currently guided by Chris Stein from the National Park Service. And the aim is to engage organizational partners in pollinator habitat, restoration, and education. And how? By facilitating collaboration by National Heritage areas and Rotary clubs and districts with community institutions. So Rotary might be another source of support for your efforts. I'll put the link for Operation Pollination in the chat later. So if you have any comments or suggestions or questions, I think we can do that now. I think Renee is going to coordinate that. And if you want to follow up, please contact info@housatonicheritage.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, everybody. Vivian, if you're able to stop sharing.
Oh, yes. There we go.
So I would say the easiest way, if you have a question, is to go to the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. If you push that, the raise hand button will pop up. That way I can see you, because we have enough people, you're not all fitting on one screen. But if you want to instead just shout out or put your question in the chat, that's fine too. And I will call on people in order that I see them pop up. Jean, go ahead.
Hi, my picture is in here. I'm curious of all these wonderful talk, and there's so much land to connect, and I'm really excited. Have any efforts been made to bring these corridors onto college campuses? And does anyone know?
I would say
Well,
panelists, if you know, just shout out.
If you know, yes. If you don't, great opportunity, and I think I'm going to have my high school students work on that.
I just want to address that the wonderful organization B Cities USA also has B Campuses USA, and for some reason Massachusetts might only have one, but it's not a competitive program, but there are certain things that have to be followed, and somehow I don't know if there's some way Massachusetts Pollinator Network could, sow a seed somewhere. I know Tufts, of course, has a lot going, and UMass almost had a B Campus USA, but the person graduated and it never got certified. That's all I know.
Okay, thank you.
I think Vivian, did you want to talk about that at all?
well, just the project that I mentioned, that was ecological campus designed by the Conway School in collaboration with meetings and students and faculty and staff at Berkshire Community College, is trying to make the whole campus into a pollinator pathway. They already have a beautiful meadow of about 10 acres. And in addition, plans include taking a lot of areas of lawn and turning that into meadow, as well as specific pollinator gardens and plantings, and preserving in various areas where plants are already in existence that could be considered part of a pollinator pathway. So it doesn't extend out into the larger community. The college itself is at the very edge of the city of Pittsfield, but certainly the campus itself, and they are currently now starting to plan how to implement all this. The first thing they're doing is developing signage. With their students, who are developing signage for the various sites, so that both those who are part of the campus and also visitors can learn more about various pollinator and climate resilient plantings.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vivian. Charlie, you have a question?
Yes. First of all, let me just second what Jean just said. This has been a terrific presentation. Thanks to all the participants. It's been wonderful. My question is, it seems like the sort of most common approach is to sort of educate people about the value of pollinator gardens, invite them to participate, invite them to map their gardens and sort of see what pathways emerge. And I'm wondering if anyone has any experience with being more proactive about which landowners participate, either by sort of first strategically mapping corridors that you would like to see connect natural areas, or seeing what pathways begin to emerge and then soliciting participation by specific landowners that are within the gaps.
Peggy, go ahead. You are muted, Peggy.
A while back, the Franklin Regional Council of Government got a $70,000 grant to work with about 9 or 10 towns and do just kind of what you're saying, is have a plan for how to build, a lot of it was like hedgerows and it was farming related because this is all a rural area. So I know about that. And also Ireland can put us to shame because they have universities. I mean, it's massive amounts of collaboration in Ireland to build, pathways in towns to get colleges, corporations, do stuff. It takes champions. I think that's something we can learn, is it takes a champion, to just get behind it and enthusiasm and get those volunteers out there. I was looking at what the Cape Cod has done, and I think there are champions in each of the towns that have participated. So that's just what I've been observing.
Great. Peggy, and I'll follow up with Franklin County. If you can send or put in the chat a link to what they're doing in Ireland, any places to sort of plug in,
Yep.
that would be great. Thank you.
Did anyone else have a follow-up on that? Any other panelists or not panelists? Maybe we have a lot of experts in the audience too. Okay, Claudia, go ahead. You are muted, Claudia.
Hi, can you hear me now? Okay. My question is on sort of a lower level, and it arose from the fact that I found out that I have lead in my soil. And I know that my blueberry bushes are pollinated by the busy bees. I live in Cambridge, so I live in an older city. All of our cities are older. So my question really resolves into, do we know how potentially damaged soils might be affecting the pollinators who we are trying to encourage? If we find an old industrial site that's abandoned, or my backyard next to a couple 100-year-old house that has nasty stuff in it, do we have any sense of whether that needs to be cleaned up, how it affects the buzzing bees who are happily pollinating but maybe ingesting bad things? I just don't know. All I know is I found out that there's lead where my blueberry bushes are, and now I'm worried about the bees.
That's a really good question, Claudia. I honestly hadn't occurred to me before. If anybody has thoughts, panelists, give you first dibs, but yes, Brucey, go ahead.
So a couple of thoughts. One is that just as it's suggested to use raised beds if you have lead in your soil and you want to grow vegetables, you can do the same thing with native plants. There's also an indication that not all parts of the plant take up heavy metals and other nefarious things equally. And I think this would be a fabulous research question to pose to somebody like Nick Dorian or folks out at UMass Amherst who are already working in the pollinator insect world. And that's my sense.
Thank you, Brucey. Does anyone else, whether you're panelist or audience, have any info on this question? Can pollinators be harmed by the heavy metals and other toxins in our soil? Okay, that is one we're going to have to keep looking into.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry we couldn't answer your question, Claudia. Any other questions for our amazing panel?
Are you going to send resources? Are you going to?
They are in the chat. The chat will also go out with the recording. When I send it out, it should be tomorrow. So yes.
Okay, because I'm struggling to get the resource that Charlie wanted before we quit.
Donna says lots of studies on honeybees and lead, but not in our native bees. Donna, do you, if you're not trying to put you on the spot, but do you know what the study showed with honeybees and lead? Okay. All right. Well, that really is a fascinating question. So let's hopefully we can figure that out. Checking if we have any more questions. Okay. Charlie, do you see Peggy's note to you to email her? If for any reason
Yes,
this,
I do. I do.
okay,
Thank you.
awesome, perfect.
Thanks, Peggy.
Great. I'm going to throw the links into the chat again on our upcoming events and including our YouTube channel where all of these recordings go. And I just want to thank everyone for coming and for our amazing panel for your just terrific presentation. And I hope that we all, I mean, I think this is actually a really interesting conversation to keep going at our brown bag lunches, not to plug that, but I'll plug that, on how people are doing with this. Stowe, we would love to hear about how it's going, you know, and if anyone else is thinking of starting one, Charlie, I think you might be thinking of starting one. We'd love to be kept informed on how it's going. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy the wonderful evening, and I hope to see you at the next month's event.
Thanks,
Good night.
Renee.